Hey guys, tonight, we climb quietly up the winding slopes of Mount Olympus, not to barge into a thunderous council of gods, not to steal fire or hurl golden apples, but to visit the one place where none of that matters. A calm corner, a warm light, a crackling hearth that smells faintly of lavender and honeyed barley. This is not the drama wing of Olympus. This is the hearth room. And here, sitting cross-legged in a soft saffron robe, is Hestia. She doesn't need a chariot pulled by wild beasts. No eagle-summoned spectacles. Just a kettle over the flame and the quiet conviction of someone who decided ages ago that peace was a better power. You step carefully because on Olympus the wrong step can lead to eternal embarrassment, or worse, being turned into a shrub, and you keep your voice low. Not because Hestia insists, just because it feels right. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where are you tuning in from tonight? And what time is it for you? Drop it in the comments if your eyes haven't already closed halfway. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The scent of olive wood curls through the air as you step into the high-beamed hall at the heart of Olympus. It's not the grandest chamber that belongs to Zeus's throne room full of gold and glowing clouds, but it is the most lived in. Think comfortable sandals over bronze-plated boots. There are woven cushions scattered across the stone floor, warm light flickering off burnished pots, and a steady friendly warmth that seeps into your bones. Hestia is here. Not arrives dramatically here. Not descends in a sparkle here. She is always here. Her fire never goes out. That's sort of her whole thing. Historians, and by that I mean ancient poets with suspiciously dramatic flair, often describe the other gods in loud theatrical terms. Thunder wielders, war screamers, ocean shakers. But Hestia, she tends the flame. She keeps the home fire burning literally and metaphorically, which doesn't sound impressive at first, until you remember that in ancient Greece everything revolves around fire. It cooks, it warms it, signals welcome, it burns away rot. Every city keeps a flame going for Hestia, and every traveler prays to her before setting out. And yet she is not flashy. She doesn't storm in or flirt aggressively or transform mortals into lizards for looking at her wrong. She just is. And there is something radical about that. You take a seat near her, careful not to knock over the tiny clay cup of tea someone left on the step. She looks up and smiles, one of those small knowing smiles. Not condescending, just content. She sees you, all of you, and somehow you don't feel the need to impress her. Behind her, the hearth crackles softly. The firewood is fragrant sprigs of rosemary and dried orange peel tucked between the logs. You breathe deeply. A warm calm spreads through your chest like a cat stretching. She doesn't speak yet. She rarely speaks first. That's another thing about Hestia. She listens more than she talks. You get the sense she's heard every story in the cosmos and has quietly chosen not to make most of them about her, which is rare on this mountain. Outside, somewhere in the upper halls, you hear the unmistakable thunderclap of Zeus having a bad day, followed by a very sarcastic cough from Hera. Someone slams a golden goblet. A lyre is thrown. Typical Tuesday. Hestia doesn't flinch. She stirs the stew with a long-handled spoon made of laurel wood and hums to herself. You glance around the room. It's a mix of practical and sacred. There's a woven rug bearing a spiral motif, her symbol. A small clay tablet with a prayer etched in old script, the kind that predates vowels. A tray with figs and barley biscuits. No thrones. No battle standards. Just calm. A feather floats in through the high window. Lands on the edge of the hearth. Doesn't burn. Hestia watches it. A moment, then returns to stirring. You're not sure if the feather means something, but it feels like it does. And in the back of your mind, the thought begins to glow. What if the most powerful being here is the one who doesn't shout? Historians still argue whether Hestia held influence equal to the Big Six, Zeus, and the hot mess siblings. She rarely shows up in the epic poems. She doesn't pick sides in wars. She doesn't turn into a cow or ride one into battle. But she is invoked in every household prayer. Every sacrificial flame begins with her. In a way, she's the first name on every list. and the last one standing. You shift your weight on the cushion warmth seeping into your back from the heated stones. You wonder what the others make of her. Do they think she's boring? Do they secretly envy her? A spark pops. She lifts her eyes and gives you that look again. That I already know what you're thinking look. You smile. She knows. She always knows. And for tonight, you're welcome to stay. The fire cracks again, just a soft split of resin in the wood, and you settle further into the warmth. Outside the hall, Olympus continues its slow churn of immortality filled with everything dramatic and extra. But here within the hearthroom time doesn't rush. It simmers. You glance across the low chamber, and even though it's perfectly still, you can feel the tension humming from the outer world. The gods live loudly, and Olympus reflects it. Somewhere Ares is probably sparring shirtless in a colonnade, grunting with every overly theatrical swing. Aphrodite lounges on a shell somewhere adjusting a gold anklet while surrounded by giggling nymphs. Hermes as well. Hermes is most likely trying to convince a turtle to become musical again. And yet Hestia remains, always at the center, always the quietest orbit. She moves now just a shift of her shoulder and the soft clink of a ladle against the side of a pot. You watch her add a sprig of time. No lightning, no divine aura. Just one goddess, one pot, and the confidence of knowing she doesn't need to prove a single thing. The Olympian family is frankly a handful. Let's start with the top. Zeus, the moody patriarch with a penchant for swan's thunder and micromanaging fate. He's got two moods, benevolent ruler, and why did that mortal say my name with a tone, Hera queen of the gods, which sounds great, until you realize it involves decades of babysitting your husband's ego while plotting creative revenge that usually involves turning someone into livestock. Poseidon ocean god, moody trident. Guy and collector of sea creatures that have never existed. He builds underwater palaces but gets salty when no one visits. Demeter, the original plant mom with seasonal emotional control. When she's happy, wheat flourishes. When she's upset, welcome to eternal winter. Hades goth uncle. Doesn't visit often, might be emotionally well-adjusted but also might keep pomegranates around as emotional leverage. Hestia. She cooks. She tends the flame. She refuses to fight over who gets which planet or which mortal city-state. She likes quiet. And in this family that makes her a unicorn. You step lightly toward a wide niche in the wall where offerings are stacked. Olive oil in stoppered jars. Loaves of barley bread wrapped in fig leaves. Someone's clearly left a bundle of hand-spun wool dyed the color of plum skins. All given not in hope of blessing, but in gratitude for steadiness, for presence, for the kind of divine company that doesn't leave scorch marks on the furniture. Hestia sees you glance at it, doesn't comment, just nods. You wonder what Olympus would be like if everyone else had her energy. Probably less lightning, fewer shouting matches, maybe even coordinated potluck dinners. Historians still debate whether the hearth in Olympus was metaphorical or literal. Was it a symbolic central fire? Or was it a cozy actual fire pit with embers that never died? But tonight, watching the way it glows just right across the polished stone, you know. It's both. You glance toward the far archway just in time to hear raised voices. Something about a chariot and someone not returning a belt. You sigh. Hestia doesn't look up. Instead, she lifts a clay bowl from the edge of the hearth, fills it with warm lentils and herbs, and places it gently on the floor in front of the doorway. You realize it's not for a god. It's for a stray dog, one that probably wanders the marble halls like an after-hours janitor unseen by most. The dog appears 5 seconds later. You blink. It limps slightly, one ear flopped down the other alert. It pauses, makes eye contact with Hestia, and sits before beginning to eat. Hestia smiles. You nearly burst into tears. It's been that kind of day. And now you get it. In a world full of peacocks, she's the hearth cat. The quiet keeper. The one who never left the room and somehow made it feel like home. You lean back against the stone bench, which is softer than it looks. Maybe that's part of the magic. Hestia doesn't need marble carved in her image. She just needs a place where people feel safe enough to rest. Somewhere far above, Apollo is probably tuning his lyre aggressively in response to a compliment that wasn't about him. Athena's organizing an argument between scholars. Dionysus is, well, somewhere strange and festive. But here, there's just stew, and a fire, and the soft breath of a sleeping dog curled beside your foot. The room dimly echoes with the passage of time, not in chimes or bells, but in breath and crackle in pot lids gently rattling with the steam. This is the room where things stop happening, where motion ends, where arrival is enough. Hestia moves again, wrapping a cloth over the pot, folding it carefully like she's tucking in a story. You wonder how long she's been doing this. How many centuries? How many gods have passed through raging or weeping or plotting and found themselves slowed by the hearth light? And you wonder how many never even noticed her. But tonight you do. You see her, and she sees you. And in a world of immortal egos and god-sized tempers, that might just be the rarest thing of all. The dog snores gently, paws twitching in some dream of chasing ambrosia-flavored rabbits. You resist the urge to reach out and scratch behind its ear, not because it's forbidden, but because the moment feels too sacred to interrupt. Hestia, seated beside the hearth, refills her cup with something that smells of honey and chamomile and gestures softly for you to do the same. You nod your thanks and take a sip. It's warm, gently sweet, and somehow tastes like trust. You sink deeper into the cushions as the firelight flickers across the stone walls. Your body has adjusted to this quiet now, and your thoughts are beginning to do the same. You're not counting time anymore, just following the pulse of the place, click-pull, thread beat. It's strange to think that this quiet goddess began her story in the same absurd, mythic mess as all the others, born to Cronus and Rhea, which, to be clear, was not exactly a family you'd want to marry into. Cronus was the king of the Titans, a sort of proto-god with bad parenting instincts and a deep mistrust of his children, so much so that he swallowed each one whole the moment they were born. No time to name them. No monogrammed onesies. Just straight from cradle to esophagus. Hestia was the first. The first swallowed. The first to vanish into the belly of her father, who treated parenting like a competitive eating contest. Historians still argue whether Cronus actually digested his children, or if they just hung out awkwardly in his divine intestines. The stories never mention plumbing, but either way, Hestia existed for years in cramped silence, waiting, watching, maybe humming softly to herself while her siblings fumed. Later, Zeus would get sneaky and free them all in a rather dramatic reversal, tricking Cronus into vomiting them up one fully grown child at a time, like an angry magician pulling adult demigods from a hat. And Hestia, she came out first, the first in and the first back out. No fanfare, no complaints, just a soft exhale as she stepped into the world again. You imagine her dusting herself off, adjusting her robe, and looking around at the screaming thunder gods and rage-filled sea kings, and immediately thinking, no, thank you. She doesn't yell, doesn't seek vengeance. She just wants to sit by the fire, and maybe boil some lentils. You sip again and feel the warmth spread through your chest. There's something about that moment, Hestia emerging from Cronus's belly, blinking in the light, not demanding recompense, or hurling javelins, that feels more powerful than anything Zeus ever did with a lightning bolt. The others made noise. She made warmth. You stand and wander to the edge of the hearth's glow. The hall stretches behind you in dim relief shadows from the flames flickering across the floor. The murals here aren't epic battle scenes or processions of celestial glory. They're simple figures seated together passing bowls, firelight in homes. A woman at the center, never the largest, never even named, just always there. And you know without needing a label that it's Hestia, always centered, always igniting without consuming. One panel shows a mortal family gathered in a tiny clay brick home eating olives and fish. In the background, a fire glows. That's her too. Not a visitor, not a grand appearance, just the ember that doesn't go out. It's easy to forget that Hestia is one of the original Olympians. She doesn't flaunt her lineage, but she's got just as much divine stock as any of her more flamboyant siblings. Zeus got the sky, Poseidon got the sea, Hades got the underworld, Hera took marriage, Demeter the harvest, and Hestia, she asked for the hearth, not a kingdom, not a temple or domain, just the right to sit in the center and keep it warm. Historians suggest it wasn't because she lacked ambition, but because she already had what she wanted. That's a rare trait in any world. You make your way back toward the cushions, where Hestia now seems to be braiding something, thin cords of wool twisted calmly in her lap. Her fingers are steady, patient. You get the feeling she could tie the universe back together if someone would just let her. The dog shifts and sighs in its sleep. The fire pops, From above, faint vibrations signal some new debate breaking out near the ambrosia fountains. Probably Dionysus defending his wine recipes again. You and Hestia exchange a glance. No words needed. Just shared knowing. You lie back, resting your head against a folded tunic someone left behind. It smells faintly of bay leaves and beeswax. And as your eyes close halfway, the soft hum of the hearth wraps around you like a lullaby sung by the stones themselves. Hestia doesn't need followers or grand myths. She doesn't need a symbol carved into mountaintops. Her worship is in the silence, in the steam rising from a kettle, in the shared bowl, in the warmth between people who remember how to sit still. And tonight you remember too. You wake not with a jolt, but with that soft, melty drift upward from sleep that only happens when you're safe, warm, and possibly surrounded by divine lentils. The fire hasn't dimmed. Of course it hasn't. Hestia's hearth doesn't flicker out no matter how long you close your eyes. She's still there, exactly where she was. Seated, composed, her expression as calm as stone, polished by centuries of footsteps. Her braided wool now rests in a tidy coil beside her like a quiet snake of purpose. You stretch a little, and she hands you a cup of something warm without needing to ask. You sip. Still honey. Still chamomile. Still everything you didn't know you needed. You've met the family. You've seen the chaos. You've heard the thunderbolts and dramatic sighs echoing through the marble halls. And yet here she is, the eldest sibling of them all. No throne, no badge. Just this seat-centered quiet, always warm. You wonder how the others feel about that. When Zeus became king, he distributed power like a substitute teacher handing out hall passes. Gods got realms weapons, sacred animals, signature haircuts. But when it came to Hestia, he didn't assign her to something flashy. He asked her what she wanted. And she said, "I'd like the hearth of Olympus. And of every home, every city, every temple. Not dominion over oceans or storms, but the center, the literal and symbolic core of life." And just like that, she became both everywhere and nowhere. No massive temples, no gilded processions, but every flame lit in her name. Every home a sanctuary to her spirit. Historians still discuss whether Hestia's domain was more symbolic than divine. Was she truly present in every hearth fire, or was she just honored there? Did her flame do anything? But they always miss the point. She was there. She is there. Stillness doesn't need thunder to be real. You wander across the hall to a mosaic set in the floor. It's shaped like a spiral. Again, her quiet symbol. Gold and terracotta tiles wind inward. No beginning or end. No urgent direction. Just a gentle path inward. You step onto it barefoot and walk the spiral slowly, letting each loop unwind your mind like a skein of yarn in warm hands. Outside the chamber, other gods are flexing. You know it. You can feel it in the marble. Apollo is probably performing a ballad to an audience of one himself. Ares is shadowboxing imaginary foes. Athena is outlining a 12-step plan to improve Spartan education. And Hestia, she's unrolling flatbread. There's something revolutionary in that. You sit near her again, cross-legged now. She's adding a pinch of salt to a small loaf as it toasts on a smooth stone near the fire. No divine sparks. No singing birds. Just the smell of dough and olive oil and the sound of silence being nurtured. You notice that the hearth isn't just firewood. There are pieces of driftwood, olive branches, herbs wrapped in twine. Each addition changes the scent slightly. Someone somewhere carefully tends this mix. You wonder if the logs ever run out, if there's some magical basket that refills itself, or if more likely Hestia just has everything she needs because she never asks for more than that. She breaks the bread and offers you a piece. Of course, it's perfect. Crisp on the outside, soft on the inside, slightly nutty a flavor you can't name, but makes you feel nostalgic for something that may never have happened. You take a second bite and feel the warmth go straight to your toes. You try to picture Hestia in a different role, maybe riding a chariot like Apollo, or conducting a war strategy like Athena. And the image feels ridiculous. Not because she's incapable, but because she'd never want to. She isn't the kind of goddess who needs to be seen. She's the kind who needs to be felt. And somehow, that matters more. You glance at the ceiling, high and curved, painted with constellations. In the very center, barely noticeable unless you're looking for it, is a single golden dot. No shape, no flourish. Just a center point. You realize that's her star. Not the brightest, but the one all the others revolve around. You lie back on the floor, head resting on a folded robe, and watch the fire's reflection dance across the stone. Your breath sinks to its rhythm in with the ember glow out with the smoke swirl. Somewhere above a door slams. Then silence. You imagine Dionysus walking by, pausing at the doorway, smelling the bread, then deciding to cause mischief elsewhere. He always does. You smile. You wonder how many Olympian disputes could have been solved with just one cup of Hestia's tea and a warm spot near the hearth. Probably most of them. But gods, like mortals, tend to look past what's right in front of them when chasing significance. And Hestia, she is significance. The kind that doesn't ask for attention, just for the flame to be kept alive. You close your eyes again. The fire pops gently. The dog snores. And Hestia, ever patient, hums a melody that isn't a song so much as a feeling. The tune of being home. The sound of not needing to prove a thing. The bread's warmth lingers in your chest as you stretch your legs out, toes just brushing the edge of the hearthstones. Hestia's still beside you, threading something delicate thin fibers through her fingers, twisting them into cord as though braiding quiet itself. You shift propped on one elbow now and take in the room again. The fire, the quiet, the bare essentials of life at peace. There's no glittering gold piled around her. No murals of monsters slain or empires conquered. Just the scent of roasted barley and rosemary. The hush of flickering light, and a silence so rich it starts to hum. And that's when you realize this isn't just a personal sanctuary. This is a job. Hestia doesn't sit here because she's passive. She sits here because someone has to. Keeping the fire going literally and symbolically was considered sacred in ancient Greece. The hearth wasn't just where you cooked. It was where oaths were sworn, babies were named, and hospitality began. Every home's first fire was kindled from the city's central flame, which was itself sacred to Hestia. You didn't just light a fire. You invited a goddess in. Historians agree that Hestia's influence extended through every household. You could be a goat herder in the hills or a merchant in Athens, and you'd still say her name when lighting the lamp at dusk. She was domestic, yes, but her domesticity was universal, which meant her workload nonstop. You watch her as she adjusts the flame, nudging a twig just so, and think of how many homes she's in at once. You picture 100 fires flickering in clay ovens across the countryside, 1,000 candles glowing in city shrines. Each one is a hello to her, a quiet check-in. She hears them all. And what does she do in return? She stays, doesn't judge, doesn't demand, just stays, and tends. You walk to the far wall where a series of small clay tiles are arranged in a circle. They're simple, painted with soot and ochre. Each one bears a symbol, a loaf, a flame, a bowl, a spiral, and at the center, a tiny seated figure. No crown, no weapon, just stillness. You reach out and hover your hand over the center tile. The stone is warm, but not from the fire. It feels like breath, like presence. Behind you, Hestia chuckles softly. You can touch it, she says, her voice like cloth being folded. You do. And it feels like home. You return to the hearth and sit cross-legged. Hestia offers you a fig dried and plump. You nibble it and nod in appreciation. She nods back. A goddess of few words. Outside, the rumble of godly chaos seems to have paused. Maybe someone fell asleep mid-argument. Or maybe they remembered there are only so many times you can argue about ambrosia rations before it gets old. You lean closer to the fire. It's hypnotic the way the flames weave upward, licking the air like silk ribbons. It doesn't roar, it breathes, and you realize this is the kind of flame you listen to. And it's the kind of job that never ends. There are no days off for hearthkeeping. No time when people don't need warmth or food or reassurance. Hestia could leave, could stretch out, take a holiday to Delos, ride dolphins with Apollo, sip something fermented in Dionysus's garden of intoxicated foxes. But she never does. She chose this. And the fire stays lit because she keeps showing up. You glance around and imagine how different Olympus would look if more gods had chosen service over spectacle. If immortality was used for maintenance rather than flair. Historians still argue whether Hestia was technically part of the 12 Olympians. Some lists include her, Others bump her off in favor of Dionysus, which, if we're being honest, feels like classic Olympian bookkeeping swap out the goddess of constancy for the god of parties. Very on brand. But Hestia, she didn't complain. She stepped aside, gracefully, and kept doing the work. She didn't need the title. She had the role. You wonder if that ever bothered her. If maybe on a quiet night like this one, she looked up at the constellations and thought, no one's written an epic about me. But then she probably stirred the soup and thought, that's fine. Let the others have their dramas. I have basil. You stretch your arms and yawn. She pours more tea. Not because she's trying to impress you, just because your cup was empty. You sip. And finally, you begin to understand that this isn't a goddess of fire. It's a goddess of tending, of holding space, of the labor no one notices because it prevents disaster rather than causing it. And in a world built on shouting, that might just be the most divine power of all. The fire dims for a moment not because it falters, but because the wind outside shifts. A gentle breath no stronger than the flap of a pigeon's wing rustles the edge of the stone doorway, and the flames dance lower in reply. But Hestia leans forward, pokes one twig into place, and the hearth lifts again quiet, golden eternal. You're watching something that looks like nothing, but is everything. That's the rhythm here. No battles, no celestial brawls, just the quiet certainty of a flame that refuses to die, and the goddess who never leaves it alone. And it's especially striking when you remember just how loud the rest of Olympus tends to be. Ares, for instance. You know Ares is nearby because somewhere beyond this hall, there's the unmistakable sound of iron clashing on iron. Someone yells something about honor and glory and possibly why didn't you hold your shield like I said, classic Ares. The god of war wears leather armor that looks suspiciously like he stole it off a movie set. His favorite sound is yelling. His favorite drink is blood, or at least wine that tastes like it. And he's never met a disagreement that couldn't be settled with a punch. Dionysus is likely nearby too. You know because the scent of crushed grapes and questionable decisions begins to waft in on the breeze. Someone giggles. A cymbal crashes. A donkey brays in agreement. Dionysus is the god of wine madness and parties that last longer than most mortal marriages. Somewhere in the sky chambers, Hermes is probably halfway through explaining a heist to a very confused goat. Apollo is composing a hymn about his own brilliance. Aphrodite is busy being worshipped. Hephaestus is tinkering with metal again. Demeter is calculating crop yields with anxiety you can smell. They are all in their own way exhausting. And Hestia. She's brushing crumbs off the stone ledge and humming to herself. You watch her calmly add more fuel to the hearth, a carefully wrapped bundle of herb-tied twigs. The smell shifts now, a note of lavender and myrrh. She is scenting the fire not for power, not for performance, but simply because it makes the room more welcoming. And she's done this for centuries. Millennia. With no tantrums, no lightning, no poems in her honor carved into cliffs. Just comfort. It's easy to forget that in mythology, the Olympians are a deeply dysfunctional family. There are curses and betrayals and so much shape-shifting. Most of them have turned into animals at least once. Hestia, as far as records go, has never needed feathers or fur. She doesn't disguise herself. She doesn't sneak off to seduce anyone. She just is. And that might be the most radical thing a goddess can do. Historians still debate the real reason she rejected marriage. The myths say that both Apollo and Poseidon courted her. Imagine that. The god of the sun and the god of the sea both kneeling with gifts in hand, lyres strumming, waves curling, and Hestia seated cross-legged in a corner, just sips her tea and says, "No, thank you. No drama. No rage. Just boundaries." What a queen. You imagine the moment. Poseidon with his wet beard and sea spray probably shouting poetry with the subtlety of a beached whale. Apollo flexing his golden biceps in the sun like a divine peacock, and Hestia entirely unimpressed. No, she probably said, "I've got the fire to tend." And that was that. No curses, no revenge, just decline. With grace, you step away from the hearth and wander into the next alcove, still part of her space, but filled with storage jars and small votive figures. You find clay miniatures of hearths, tiny iron stoves, wooden bowls etched with spirals, all offerings left by mortals over the years, honoring the one who doesn't ask for it. You turn one over gently in your hands. It's a carved loaf of bread not even the size of your palm. The paint has faded, but someone once colored it with saffron and burnt umber. You can almost hear the prayers murmured over it. Hestia, keep our home warm. Not smite our enemies or grant us fortune, but just keep us warm. The simplicity is beautiful and honestly revolutionary. You return to the hearth. Hestia's stoking it again, her motion like clockwork, slow and precise. She meets your eyes. They think power is noise, she says quietly. But noise burns out. You nod. She adds, I just keep the coals ready. And somehow that lands deeper than any prophecy or sermon you've ever heard. You glance at the dog, still snoring, one leg twitching like he's chasing dream rabbits. The smell of warm bread and wood smoke fills your lungs. You feel your shoulders lower, your chest loosen. That strange hum of stillness wraps around you again, gentle but firm, like being held by silence itself. You rest your head against a smooth stone and feel the warmth radiate from within. This isn't fire as destruction. It's fire as memory, fire as endurance. And in the quiet you realize there is no throne here, no need for one. She's already seated in the heart of it all. The shadows grow longer across the hearth room as the sun outside turns to gold and then dusky pink. Olympus always seems to catch the last bit of daylight, like it's been reserved specially, maybe a perk of living on a mountaintop. The fire glows deeper, like it too has begun to settle in for the night. You lean your cheek against your hand and feel the heat soaking into your bones, as if even your blood has begun to slow. And that's when she tells you the story. No preamble, no dramatic flourish, just a slight shift in tone as Hestia says, they asked me to marry. You glance at her, but she's not looking at you. She's looking at the fire as if the flame itself remembers it better than she does. Apollo, first. Sun god. Beautiful in that overly polished way that makes you wonder how much time he spends on his own reflection. He had gifts, of course. Songs, promises, probably a chariot ride across the sky. He played his lyre beneath her window and the air shimmered with the music. And she listened, because that's what Hestia does. But when he asked, she shook her head, quietly, not unkindly. It's beautiful, she told him, but it's not home. And then Poseidon came, crashing in like a tidal wave with his salt-rough beard and stormy eyes. Always a bit too loud, always a bit too much. He didn't sing, he just demanded. Offered kingdoms beneath the sea, coral palaces, the ability to breathe underwater without getting frizzy hair. She thanked him, and still said no. Historians love to speculate about this moment. Was it resistance? Was she protecting something? Did she fear vulnerability? Or was she guarding a higher purpose? Scholars argue whether this choice was cultural commentary, divine independence, or just a narrative footnote. But in this room, with the fire reflecting in her eyes, it wasn't a rejection. It was a vow. She made the choice to remain unbound, to keep her hands free, to belong to no one and therefore in a way to everyone, to be not one person's goddess but the hearth's, the place at the center of all things, the still point in the spinning world. It wasn't dramatic. She didn't throw her cup or curse the sea. She just said, no thank you, and meant it. And that was that. You let out a low breath, the kind you didn't know you were holding. Hestia pours more tea, the herbal scent curling into the space between you like a ribbon. I don't mind company, she adds gently, but I don't need possession. You nod. The idea feels revolutionary and ancient all at once. No need to dominate, conquer, or attach. Just to be. Just to tend. You wonder how the others took it. Poseidon probably stormed off, sulking into the ocean and splashing dramatically. Apollo might have written a moody song with extra harp solos. But Hestia didn't waver. She didn't apologize. She just kept the fire going. You look down at the embers, steady and glowing like memory itself. No flare, no ash, just a slow burn. And somewhere in that light, you begin to understand what divine boundaries really look like. The dog shifts and lets out a sigh that sounds suspiciously like contentment. You scratch behind its ear and it thumps its tail once before drifting deeper into dreams. The room smells like time now, faint and earthy. Hestia's fingers work steadily, threading more chords, each movement the echo of her choice. She was never forced into a role. She chose it, chose to remain, to hold space, to be the center when everyone else wanted an edge. And when you think about it, Maybe that's why her fire never goes out. Because it's not built on conquest or adoration. It's built on presence. On saying no with gentleness, on choosing care over acclaim, on leaving the noise to others while tending the thing everyone needs but takes for granted. You sip again from your cup. It tastes like resolve now. Warm, quiet, unmistakable. And for the first time, you realize this isn't a minor myth. It's the blueprint, the bones of what it means to be enough without needing more. You lean back once more, the stone surprisingly soft beneath you. The flames flicker in patterns. Click, pull, thread, beat. Even the fire seems to hum the rhythm of her choosing. It's darker now, though not dark in any fearful way. The fire sees to that. Shadows have curled around the edges of the chamber like lazy cats content to keep their distance as long as the hearth stays lit. You adjust your position, spine sinking into the cool stone behind you, and watch Hestia. She's still weaving. Or maybe not weaving exactly. It's more like tending. One loop at a time, a twist here, a pull there. It's impossible to tell if she's making something or just keeping her hands busy while her mind travels deeper. Either way, you feel the rhythm. Click, pull, thread, beat. You've heard that before. Maybe in the loom clack of a distant village. Maybe in the creak of branches or the breath between stories. Maybe it's the sound truth makes when it tries not to interrupt. And Hestia has always been the patron of that. The goddess of not interrupting. You remember what Aphrodite said about her once in a myth, barely whispered aloud. That Hestia was nice enough, if a bit plain. The kind of backhanded compliment that echoes more than it should. But it misses the mark entirely. Because Hestia isn't plain. She's clear. Which is far more dangerous. You think back to the parties on Olympus, those endless feasts where Dionysus spills wine, and Ares boasts about his latest skirmish, and Hermes steals half the olives before anyone notices. You try to picture Hestia there. And then you remember. She's always there, but never the center of attention. Never fanning herself dramatically or quoting obscure prophecies. She simply ensures everyone has enough to eat, that the fire doesn't smoke too much, that the bread is warm. She's not a wallflower. She's the wall. The whole structure leans on her. And not once does she ask for credit. Historians still debate whether Hestia's vow of chastity was an act of self-sacrifice or self-definition. Was she preserving her purity for sacred reasons, or was it just her way of saying, I don't want to deal with your nonsense? Either way, the result is the same. No lovers. No scandals. No divine drama trailing her name like incense smoke. She made her boundary and it held. You watch her now seated in the same spot as always and marvel at how rare that is. In a pantheon that's basically a divine soap opera, Hestia has no plot line, no heel turn, no redemption arc. She just is. And that is her rebellion. While others compete for temples and worshippers, she has none of the flash, but all the permanence. Her flame might not light up the sky, but it's the one you warm your hands by when the thunder fades. You walk slowly around the hearth again, taking in its glow from different angles. Each side casts different shadows, throws different shapes on the floor. You catch glimpses of things: a boy kneeling to light his family's first fire, a woman stirring soup at dusk, a soldier placing a palm on a stone altar before leaving home. And all of them whisper one name. Not Zeus, not Athena, not Apollo. Hestia. Because at the end of everything, people don't pray for triumph or justice or revenge. They pray for warmth. They pray to go home. And that's what Hestia gives them. You kneel beside her again. She doesn't speak, but she doesn't need to. Her silence is so full of meaning that words would feel like noise. You realize this is what so many gods mistake for passivity. But it's not. It's power. The kind that doesn't flinch, doesn't waver, doesn't need to remind you it's there. Because it always is. She adjusts a log, and the fire accepts it with a slow sigh of sparks. You watch the embers pulse and fall into a rhythm. Your breath syncs with it almost naturally. And you begin to understand something new. Hestia's domain isn't limited to hearths and homes. It's in every quiet act of grace, every pause before shouting, every meal shared, every moment when a room softens and someone says, "Stay a while." She lives there, in that softness, in the space between intensity and apathy, in the choice to remain gentle, even when you could be loud, even when you could be something else entirely. You close your eyes not from exhaustion, but from trust. Because when Hestia is near you, don't need to be alert. You are held. And in a world of gods who blaze and rage and perform, maybe the greatest miracle is simply she stayed. The fire's hush has deepened, not dimmed, not gone, just mellowed into the kind of glow you feel more than you see. The embers are no longer showing off. They've settled into themselves, and so have you. You're leaning against the hearth's stone rim now, legs stretched out, watching Hestia wrap her weaving into a soft coil as if tucking the evening to bed. A gust of Olympus air slips past the archway, warm and tinged with lavender. Somewhere up the corridor, a familiar voice is rising, sharp, regal, dramatic, in that way only a goddess can be, when she's both right and determined to remind you of it. Hera. You don't need to peek around the corner to know she's pacing. Her earrings probably clang when she's this irritated. She's listing someone's failings, most likely Zeus's. You pick out phrases like, again, with the eagle feathers and not another swan. Classic. Then, Athena joins in, her tone clipped and analytical. She's proposing a strategic response to whatever nonsense just occurred, maybe a sanctions list or a multi-step ethical critique. You can't tell which. The volume rises. There's a foot stomp, then a curse involving pomegranates. Hestia doesn't flinch. She pours more water into a small clay pot nestled beside the coals. The hiss of steam is soft, polite, almost apologetic. You look at her, then back toward the noise, and suddenly, you get it. She's not excluded from the drama. She's free of it. Because she never got tangled in the Olympic gossip net. No rivalries. No jealous brawls over apples or golden fleece. No grudges passed like inherited heirlooms. When Eris threw the apple of discord into the wedding party, who were the three who fought over it? Hera, Athena, Aphrodite. And where was Hestia making sure the fire didn't die, while everyone else ruined the seating chart? Historians still puzzle over her lack of major mythic entanglements. They try to piece together whether it's the result of lost oral tradition or intentional exclusion. Some wonder if early scribes found her too subtle for epic tales. After all, what's a story with no climax, no betrayal, no divine tantrum? But that's the point. She's the space between the stories. The breath you take before the action begins. The pause in the narrative. The warmth that makes the cold world bearable. You rise and walk softly toward the hall, just far enough to hear Hera's last scathing line. Something about burning every eagle feather he owns before you turn back. And you see it again. The difference. In a realm where reputations are forged by noise, Hestia's legacy is built from restraint. You return to the hearth and she's already holding a small bowl. Inside, honeyed almonds. You smile, take one, and feel the crunch soften into sweetness across your tongue. Do they ever stop, you ask, quietly? She shrugs. They pause. You chew thoughtfully. And you never joined them. Her lips twitch in something like a smile. Not once. And you know it's true, even in the tales where the gods are all called together, summoned to pass judgment or feast. Hestia's role is to tend the flame, not to fan it into drama. She is the only Olympian who was never involved in a divine feud, never cursed a mortal for a petty reason, never transformed a rival, never chased or was chased, just kept the fire. You look around and realize just how powerful that is. The absence of chaos isn't emptiness, it's intention. Every crack in the hearth, every softened corner, every quietly swept floor tells you who she is better than a dozen statues ever could. You settle again, beside her. She's not staring into space like someone lost in memory. She's here, entirely, now, and somehow that's more rare than you expected. You remember something from earlier, a scholar's footnote maybe, or a dusty annotation. A theory that Hestia wasn't just a goddess of the hearth, but of presence itself. That to invoke her was to call stillness into a room. Stillness that holds, stillness that listens, stillness that lets you become fully you. You glance toward the doorway again. The voices have faded. Someone's sandals echo away down the corridor. And the fire still burning. Always burning. Because the one who tends it never left to join the storm. You don't remember drifting off, but you must have just a little. The kind of dose that doesn't count as sleep, but resets something deeper. When you open your eyes, the fire is lower. but no less alive. The embers pulse slowly, like a heartbeat in the floor. Hestia is humming now. No tune you recognize. Just a few soft notes rounded and low, like she's singing directly to the flame. Or maybe it's for the room itself. A song that only stone and smoke understand. You sit up, rub your eyes and glance around, and you realize you're not in her hearth room anymore. You're outside. Still Olympus, still high above the world, but now you're walking through a sun-warmed courtyard at the edge of a city. Athenian rooftops fan out below. The scent of fresh bread and goat's milk hovers in the air. You pass under a colonnade smooth marble beneath your feet and pause at the base of a tall column. At its base burns a small, carefully protected flame. It flickers inside a bronze tripod, clean, unassuming, quietly tended. A priestess nearby brushes ash from its edges with a bundle of herbs. You've left the myth, but not the presence. This is one of Hestia's city hearths. Every major city in ancient Greece had one. In Athens, it was located in the Pantheon, the ceremonial heart of the polis. From this central flame, all other fires were kindled homes, temples, festivals. If the city expanded or founded a colony, they'd carry an ember from this flame across oceans to light the hearth of the new settlement. Imagine that, crossing mountains and waves to build something new and bringing the same spark with you. A reminder that wherever you go, home travels with you. That was Hestia's reach. Not in conquest, not in wealth, not in scandal, but in this quiet consistency. Every time someone knelt to light their fire, they were touching a thread that ran back to her. And it didn't stop in the cities. You follow the winding lanes to a rural village, now barely more than a scatter of homes around an olive grove. In the center, there's a communal hearth. No marble here, just stones worn smooth by time's soot-darkened clay, and the soft sound of stew bubbling. A child stands nearby with a stick carefully poking the fire. His grandmother calls out gently but firmly to leave the flame be, that it's Hestia's, not yours. The boy nods solemnly and backs away, eyes wide with reverence. You smile. It's not fear. It's respect. You walk further now, past harvest fields, goat pens, temple ruins. In every corner of the Greek world you spot the signs. A little offering bowl tucked near a kitchen fire. A fresh wreath of laurel above a lintel. In one courtyard, someone's drawn a spiral in ash. In another, a loaf cools by the embers untouched, saved for something unseen. Hestia is everywhere, and she asks for almost nothing in return. Just space, just presence. You find yourself near Delos now, sacred ground, birthplace of Apollo and Artemis. Even here, amid all the divine theatrics, there's a quiet corner where a flame has been tended since antiquity. Pilgrims pass it without noticing, but the priests know. The fire never goes out, and neither does her legacy. Historians still wonder why she's often omitted from the grand temples. Unlike Athena or Hera, she has no vast marble statue towering above worshippers. Her altars are small, her temples modest. Often, she shares space with others, or is honored not with monuments, but with routines. Because she doesn't need grandeur to be remembered. She's remembered in motion, in every meal, every warmth, every careful tending. You climb a hillside at dusk, where the sun drops behind Ionian waters and paints the horizon with honeyed light. A small shrine perches here, barely visible from below. A bowl of ash, a few clay figurines, one with a spiral on its back. Someone came here to thank her, and then left her alone. You breathe in, filling your lungs with time's sweet air, and something deeper, something sacred. You feel the truth of her work settle inside your ribs. Not loud, not flashy, but utterly necessary. The kind of presence you don't notice until it's gone. And then miss like a missing beat in a song you didn't realize you were humming. You return to Olympus as twilight deepens, back through the soft corridors of godly stone and fig-scented halls. And as you pass doorways, you notice how few flames still burn. But hers is waiting, as it always does. The halls feel quieter now, not empty but less frantic, as if even the other gods have taken a breath. Maybe someone finally suggested a nap. Maybe Hera tired herself out mid-rant. Maybe Dionysus is asleep beneath a vine-covered table, a goblet still in hand. Whatever the cause, Olympus has gone still. And you find yourself back at the hearth. Hestia hasn't moved much. She sits as she always has, upright, serene hands loosely resting in her lap. The fire plays across her features, warm and flickering, casting slow-moving shadows that never seem to touch her eyes. You kneel beside her once more, just close enough to feel the heat on your cheeks. The silence between you is companionable, like you've known each other a long time. Maybe you have. Maybe we all have. And this time, she speaks again. They always thought I was the quiet one, she says softly. You glance over. She smiles. But they never noticed how much you can hear when you're not talking. You grin. Of course she listens. How else could she hold space for gods and mortals alike? How else could she tend so many fires, so many homes, so many small, trembling needs? She's not just the goddess of the hearth. She's the goddess of holding still long enough to notice. And the stories. Oh, she's heard them all. Aphrodite's latest admirer. Hermes' secret tunnels beneath the wine cellar. Artemis's moonlit hunts, Apollo's endless poetry readings, Hera's exhaustive lists of offenses, even Zeus's attempts to modernize the thunderbolt. Spoiler, they never work. She listens, not because she needs gossip, but because every detail, no matter how absurd, helps her keep the hearth ready. The warmth tuned just right. The tea steeped exactly as long as it needs to be. Historians often overlook the role of emotional labor in ancient mythology. They record wars and curses and heroic trials, but rarely mention who cleaned up afterward, who waited, who offered the first meal when the swords were sheathed. But every homecoming had a hearth. Every feast had a flame. And every myth, no matter how grand, had to pass through a doorway, and that doorway belonged to Hestia. You stretch your legs and rest your head against the warm stone. She doesn't mind. In fact, she leans slightly, just enough to be near not imposing. And you begin to think of all the other unseen things she holds. The grief of a widow baking bread alone. The nervousness of a new bride lighting the evening lamp. The last ember in a soldier's kitchen before he left for war. She held them all, and never dropped a single one. You glance around the hearthroom again. Small offerings have been left here too. Slippers by the wall, a cracked bowl patched with gold, a spoon worn smooth by use. They're not flashy, but each one says the same thing. Thank you for staying. Because she didn't have to. She could have demanded a temple bigger than Zeus's, could have married a god and ruled a domain, could have unleashed firestorms or called down smoke from the heavens, but she didn't. She chose the quiet corner and kept it burning. You shift slightly, watching the flames draw patterns on the walls. Shapes emerge and vanish, a spiral, a ladder, a circle that tightens, then opens like a bloom. It's hypnotic, and you realize this is her storytelling. No parchment, no epics carved in stone. Just this flame and shadow, warmth and stillness. She doesn't need to be remembered with monuments. She is remembered in the act of remembering, in every small routine that binds people together. You wonder aloud, does anyone ever thank you? She shrugs, serene. They don't need to, but you do. You do now. Because you've seen what she guards, what she upholds, and how many stories, even the ones that shout and sparkle, would fall apart without her at their beginning and end. You settle closer to the fire, the rhythm of her silence settling into your own. No urgency, no climax, just presence. Click, pull, thread, beat. The fire hums it, the stone echoes it, and you finally feel part of the weave. Somewhere deep in Olympus, a lyre plucks a slow minor chord. One string slightly out of tune. You recognize the signature. Apollo's been at it again, composing something experimental. It drifts faintly through the corridor, but doesn't quite reach Hestia's hall. It's as though the sound, realizing where it's headed, hesitates at the threshold and turns back. Because this place doesn't crave innovation. It doesn't need to impress. It's content. You shift a little, curling your legs beneath you, hands cupped around a warm ceramic mug Hestia passed you a moment ago. It's something spiced, clove and fennel maybe, and smells like holidays you never realized you missed. The fire crackles gently. She's not tending it right now. She's just sitting with you. A rare moment of shared stillness. And then, in a voice no louder than a breath, she says, "You know they tried to retire me once." You blink. "Wait, really?" She nods. "A long time ago. Said I wasn't relevant anymore. Said the world had moved on from hearths." The thought startles you. How do you retire a goddess of the essential? Do they just blow out her flame and post a scroll on the temple door? They offered my seat to Dionysus. She adds a tiny smile playing at her lips. Said he was more exciting. Of course they did. Dionysus with his revels, and chaos, and wild poetry, the original patron of questionable decisions. You can practically hear the gods debating it. Zeus rolling his eyes, Hermes smirking in the background, Ares already half asleep. And meanwhile, Hestia sitting calmly, not arguing, just listening. Historians still argue over the Olympian 12. Who counts, who doesn't, what it even means to sit on the council of Olympus. Some texts say Hestia gave up her seat willingly. Others say it was taken. There are whole scrolls devoted to the politics of godly seating arrangements. But none of those accounts capture this. The grace in her voice when she says, "Let him have the seat. I have the flame." It wasn't resignation. It was choice. Because while others measured power by position, she measured it by presence, by constancy, by what still burned long after the applause faded. You lean forward curious. Did it bother you? Her brow furrows slightly. Not in pain, more like puzzlement. I was never there for the council, she says. I was there for the threshold. You whisper the word back. Threshold. It feels heavy in your mouth. Important. She nods. I watched over every entry and exit, every welcome, every farewell, every moment someone decided to come home, or dared to leave it. You let that settle, because it makes sense now why she doesn't need a throne, why she never fights for visibility. She's not above or below. She's at the center, the turning point. You think of every fire kindled in a new land, every wedding feast, every birth, every quiet funeral, the flame that burned steady while joy erupted or grief hollowed out a room. She was there, even when her name wasn't spoken, even when they offered her seat to someone flashier. She was there. You take another sip. The drink has cooled slightly, but the warmth is still in your chest as though Hestia poured it straight into your ribs. You wonder aloud, do they ever apologize? She looks amused. They don't need to. Of course, because apology implies something was taken. But nothing can be taken from someone who knows they never needed the seat in the first place. You stand, stretch your legs, and look around the chamber again. This time, you see it differently. Not just a room with a fire, but a sanctum. A compass. Every stone, every bundle of kindling, every worn cushion tells a story of endurance, of selfhood not traded for applause. And suddenly you think this isn't just about gods. It's about you. About anyone who ever felt like the quiet one, the steady one, the one who never made demands but kept everything going. Maybe the world doesn't always give thanks, but the world turns because of them. Because of you. You glance at Hestia. She meets your eyes serene as always. But there's a twinkle now. Just a glimmer. Like a spark caught between breath and ember. And you realize something else. She never left Olympus. Because she is Olympus. The unseen frame. The foundation. The first and final warmth. You don't say anything more. There's nothing to say. You just sit. And let the stillness hold you. You've stopped checking the hour. Not because time's irrelevant, but because time here doesn't behave the way it does in the world below. It softens at the edges, elongates in the warm glow of the hearth, curls around the corners of silence. You begin to suspect that Olympus, at least Hestia's corner of it, lives in Kairos, the Greek idea of time measured not by minutes, but by meaning. She stands now, smoothly, without ceremony. Her robes sway just slightly, a muted saffron edged in woven spirals so subtle they seem to appear only when the fire flickers. She doesn't announce where she's going. She doesn't ask you to follow. But you do. Through a narrow corridor that slopes gently downward, unexpected, considering most gods love towering heights. But Hestia prefers the root of things. The passageway is lit only by small oil lamps embedded in alcoves. Each flickers with a different color flame. Rosy, here pale green, there, soft lavender near the curve in the hall. None of them feel artificial. They feel familial. Like every flame has a memory in it. You emerge into what looks like a circular chamber carved directly from mountain stone. No columns, no statues. Just a wide round space with a single central hearth, an older one, deeper, darker, filled with thick ash and coal. Hestia gestures and you understand without words. This was the first hearth. Not just hers. The first, from the time before temples and golden goblets, when flame was still a miracle. when survival depended on whether you could coax warmth from wood and stone, when fire was the boundary between safety and night. This is what she protects. Not prestige, not ceremony, but origin. The place where everything begins. You move slowly toward the pit. There's no active fire here, but the heat remains radiating from the very stones, as though some ancient ember never went out, as though warmth willed itself to stay. Hestia kneels beside it, not to light it, just to be near it. You follow, and you think about all the firsts you've ever had. First homes, first nights alone, first meals with someone new. Every first held together by something warm, something safe, something like this. She never claimed credit for that, but she was there. Every time. Scholars sometimes theorize that Hestia's domain evolved from older pre-Olympian deities, those unnamed forces of hearth soil and sustenance. They wonder if she inherited their quiet power, if she is less a person and more an echo gathered into form. Maybe. But sitting here you sense something more immediate. She isn't a relic. She's the keeper of continuance. The fire might flicker, the room might change, but she endures. Not because she demands it, but because the world needs her to. You look over at her and ask why here. She doesn't answer right away. Instead, she takes a small pouch from within her robes and pours a few grains salt maybe, or barley into the ash. For memory, she says. The act is so simple, so ancient, so full of intention. Not a sacrifice, a reminder. And suddenly you realize this isn't just a place. It's a story. One told in heat and ash, not ink. One you carry in your breath, your bones, your routines. A myth not made of thunderbolts, but of cracked bowls and gentle hands. You feel the urge to speak to thank her again, but it fades before it reaches your lips. Because you know now, she doesn't require worship, only care, only continuation. You close your eyes and listen, not for the blaze, but for the hum beneath it. That soft, steady pulse of existence. Click, pull, thread, beat. The rhythm never ends. You sit there for a while longer beside Hestia, neither of you needing to fill the space. The deeper hearth. Room, this stone-cradled chamber feels both impossibly old and surprisingly alive. Like the mountain is breathing with you, slow and deliberate. Every heartbeat echoes through the floor, and you wonder how long this fire has been remembered. Hestia reaches toward the coals again, not to stir, not to feed, just to hover her hand above them. She seems to be listening, not with ears, with skin, with spirit. You try it too, and there it is, a low vibration, like a story being told through heat. Not one of those epic tales with monsters and quests and flashy conclusions. No, this is the other kind. The ones passed in kitchens, in quiet gardens, in the hush between storms. The ones that start with, "She always made the best lentil stew," and end with a, "I think I still miss her." It's not thrilling, but it's real. You rise not out of restlessness, but reverence. And Hestia stands with you, not to lead or follow, just to walk beside. Back up the winding corridor you go, lanterns still flickering, each one reflecting off the smooth stone, with a shimmer that could be magic or just careful design. Hard to tell with her. She keeps those lines blurry. You pass an alcove where a small woven basket rests. Inside, it dried time, a broken spindle, a doll-sized clay cup. Offerings. From someone who didn't have much but gave anyway. That's the thing about her worshippers. They were never the high priests in gold. They were the midwives, the bakers, the people who whispered thanks over boiling pots. And she heard every word. You step once more into her hearthroom, now dim and quiet again, and she moves to relight a fresh flame. She does this without flourish. No chanting, no divine spark hurled from the heavens. Just flint, kindling, and patience. 3 strikes. A breath. The flame returns. You watch it catch and grow slow and small and perfect. And somehow that's more divine than any lightning bolt. Historians still write reams about the 12 Olympians, always fixating on who sat where, who got demoted, who sparked the most war. But here's the thing, they forget. Power isn't only about elevation. Sometimes it's about staying put, about holding the same place with such grace that the world begins to orbit around you. Hestia never left Olympus. She just refused to make noise. And noise, as you're learning, is not the same as presence. You settle back on the cushion you first used. It remembers you molds easily beneath you. The warmth from the new flame feels like an echo of everything that's come before. You ask, do people still light fires for you? She looks over not with expectation but curiosity. They do, she says, but not always on purpose. You nod, because now you understand. Every campfire with stories shared around it. Every kitchen where laughter bubbles over stew. Every candle lit in a storm. Every lantern left in a window for someone to find their way home. That's her. She doesn't need altars when she's in every corner where comfort lives. In every act of intentional warmth, you lie back now, spine against the smooth floor, arms tucked behind your head. You let the glow of the fire brush your face. And for the first time in a while, you don't feel like you're waiting for something else to happen. Because this is enough. A hearth, a goddess, a silence that means something, and a presence that has never, not once abandoned you. The air has thickened with peace, not in a heavy way, in the way quilts do, in the way twilight does, in the way someone humming in the next room feels like safety without ever needing words. You lie still. Hestia's fire is no longer showy. It's past that phase. It's settled now, low flames and steady embers, a kind of glow that looks like it's been there forever and will be still long after the room empties out. You sense she's close by, not hovering, not waiting, just there. She moves quietly, tidying without fuss, the way a grandmother might smooth a cushion after you've already fallen asleep. Everything she does is soft, circular, rhythmic. Click, pull, thread, beat. That same phrase again. The myth's pulse. You ask her one more question, not because you expect an answer, but because it feels like the right thing to ask. Did you ever wish for more? She pauses, a bundle of kindling in her hands, not frozen, just considering. Then she says, I never wanted to be worshipped. You blink. You're a goddess. She smiles. Being seen isn't always the same as being known, and somehow that feels like the most Hestia thing she could possibly say. She returns to her cushion, not across the room, but beside you. She stares at the fire as though it's telling her something only she can hear. You both watch it for a long time. Then she speaks again, so low it's almost thought. I chose the hearth because it was the one place no one else would claim. Not the sky, not the sea, not war, not beauty. Just warmth. You nod slowly, and you've kept it burning. I will, as long as someone remembers to breathe slow and sit close. And there it is again, that permission. That invitation. No demands, no tests, just come close. You let your eyes close just for a second. And when you open them, you're no longer in Olympus. Or maybe you still are. The line blurs. The hearth remains, yes, but it could now be your own fireplace. Or your kitchen stovetop. Or a tiny candle flickering in the corner of your room. It doesn't matter. She's still here. In the warmth. In the quiet. In the stillness you're finally ready to trust. And though she hasn't said goodbye, you know, this is the end of her part in the tale. For now, because gods don't really exit. They just fade until you need them again. You rest your head back. The fire breathes. And so do you. Wind down final 300. Words. So, here you are where myths and memories weave together like threads in a firelit room. Nothing boomed. No one fell from the sky. There were no poisoned apples or thunderbolt duels. No grand finale. Only a quiet goddess with warm hands and infinite patience. Let your breath settle now. Like ash on stone. Like a blanket drawn gently up your shoulders. Let the tension in your chest exhale with you. Let the corners of your eyes soften. Let your thoughts slow to match the pace of the flame. You're safe here. You've always been welcome here. Even when you forgot. Even when you ran. Even when the fire seemed too far away. It was waiting for you. Because Hestia doesn't judge. She doesn't chase. She doesn't demand. She holds. She remains. And so do you. Let your body sink into stillness. Let the last flicker of firelight lull you deeper. Feel it curling through the dark like a lullaby sung by the walls themselves. a spiral of warmth, a rhythm of remembering. You don't need to carry the whole myth. You only need to carry this feeling, this presence, this peace. The hearth is yours now. Sleep. The flame will keep. You are home. You are held. You are quiet.